So good afternoon, Mr. Kunal Aggarwal. Welcome to the world's best office, a podcast where we sit back, relax, and talk about anything and everything. Thank you so much for joining us. And how are you today?
I'm doing good and thanks a lot for inviting me over. Good to be part of this podcast. I hope all our listeners and viewers basically get something out of this and get some good knowledge out of whatever we speak about today.
For those of our viewers who do not know you by face, can you tell us a bit about who you are and what you've built?
Sure. So I am the founder and CEO of Credflow. Essentially, Credflow is a cash flow management B2B SaaS. It is focused on small and medium businesses. So typically the businesses that you see around you, we help them better manage their own money so that they can become cash rich and essentially increase their profitability. So that's what we do. Our software solves a very big problem for them, which is collecting their own receivables from their customers. They typically give their goods on credit, and I'm not talking about very small retailers. We essentially cater to manufacturer, traders, and distributors. We help them collect their own payments more efficiently from their customers, making them reduce their overall working capital needs, and in turn, basically, we make them more cash efficient, which allows them to grow their business fairly quickly.
So our next question is that you have sort of founded these two companies. You did Robble first and now Credflow. So their primary aim is to help MSMEs. So what basically helped you gain that interest in helping out SMEs?
Sure. So it has got to do a lot with my own personal background. So I'll talk a little bit about it and then I'll come to why we started solving this problem. So I've been born and brought up here in Delhi itself. I belong to a family of entrepreneurs. So my father, my uncles have all been running small and medium businesses for quite some time. So that was our dinner conversations always used to be about what problems they're facing in their own business, etc. So that was a good learning point for me. I luckily got into IIT Delhi. That is where I was able to get a lot of exposure to the startup ecosystem per se. Like you guys, I was also the president of ECEL in my college.
Yes.
So that allowed me to get a lot of exposure and speak to a lot of good people. So I remember at my point in time, like you guys, I had interviewed few entrepreneurs. So I had interviewed Dipinder Goyal, Vijay Shekhar Sharma, Azhar from InShots. So these kind of guys you generally are not able to reach out to. But the exposure that you get in these kind of colleges allows you to interact with people and maybe learn a lot of things after that. So that was the starting point in my starting point in terms of the startup ecosystem. Why SMEs? Because that is something that I related to most naturally, and I had worked with few startups in college itself. They were all building something in B2B. So the first instinct that I had essentially immediately after I graduated was to basically build out a B2B e-com business. Because B2C e-com was already big and a lot of players had existed and they were scaling up. But B2B e-commerce was very, very nascent at that point in time. So that was essentially the starting point behind my first venture, which was Robble. One thing that I did was in IIT Delhi, you can essentially complete your credits early and basically use your last semester to build something of your own, or do anything, right? So I did that and utilized my last semester to basically look at a lot of different ideas and figure out. So eventually we started solving this problem for cosmetic and pharma manufacturers. We realized that they have a lot of problems around their own procurement. So we started building an aggregation platform for that. We scaled up decently well. We had about 21 crores in revenue in our first year itself. But the problem statement we realized was that the customers always want to buy goods on credit, and we were basically giving out credit to them for goods we sold. And collecting payments on time from them was a very big pain point. And that coupled with the fact that we were always in a situation wherein working capital was the bottleneck for us. However amount of money we have in our bank, that is what will determine how much we can scale up, right? So to solve that, what I had done was tied up with a lot of lenders to give credit lines to our customers. And that is where it hit me that if we could basically solve these problems together on one platform, if someone could solve someone's collection problems at one place and also give them credit. So that was essentially the starting point behind how Credflow started. So the problem statement remains the same. We help SMEs solve their collections. And if they are short of working capital, if they want to grow their business, we give them an additional line of credit from us. So this was the journey and how organically Credflow came about.
So as you said, I mean, you were a graduate from IIT Delhi, right? So and what we noticed was, I mean, each of your companies or startups that you started had one thing in common, which were they were tech based, be it from the shoe industry or the manufacturing or ultimately fintech. So I mean, which industry ultimately interested you the most, and do you think has the highest potential of growth in India?
So I mean that answer is very contextual and also has got to do a lot of with more personal experiences. So I think you can build a very big business in any industry. What you need to figure out is what is your right to win in that industry, right? So for example, I had a pre-existing right to win in this because I had that family background around SMBs, right? And that problem statement I had seen, and I had also worked with other founders solving for B2B e-com. So that was the starting point, right? And this is something that organically everyone has to figure out. Obviously, tech for me was something which was very natural to me coming from that background, and I had multiple people around me who could help that. But you see a lot of very, very different businesses in very different domains being built out, and very large businesses, right? So ranging from say blockchain and AI, a lot of people are building companies there, to making brands out of very commonplace articles, right? That you see, for example, Shark Tank is currently running today, and you see a lot of entrepreneurs from very small towns coming and selling goods which were sort of commodities, right? And they're making big brands out of that. So I think what matters is the founder market fit, that whatever market they're basically attacking, do they have a right to win there? Are they best suited for that? Do they have a knowledge of how they can build something in that? And also, I mean, it's also got to do with the kind of, not just the founder, but the team that you're able to build around yourself.
And so you mentioned in your answer earlier that you had this background in SMEs and that you sort of worked with startups before. Do you think it's important for budding inspire students like us who maybe one day would want to start our own business? Do you think it's important for us to gain some experience in the startup world before, be it in any domain? Do you think that is important, or we should just straight away go into the world and start our own project?
So ideally, one should definitely work somewhere before starting up. So I, for one, for example, started up immediately after college, and even during college started up multiple times. But what helped me essentially was that I tried out multiple things again and again, and I had also worked with other seniors who had basically founded something, right? So that gives you a lot of context in what works in real world and what doesn't, right? So for example, in college, invariably you are slightly less mature to build a large business, and over time you basically learn a lot of things. So there's one thing that if you have some experience, whatever things you will be building out of first principles, at least you can avoid those mistakes. You can avoid making mistakes that first time founders make if they're directly starting out rather than learning. So I mean, there is a very thin balance between that. So you don't want to be waiting too long and getting into a comfort zone, while at the same time you should at least have some context of the industry. You should have at least some context of how things are built, right? So it's a very thin line. Maybe ideally someone should at least get 1 to 2 years of experience and then start out after college.
You have been interacting and indulging with MSMEs for the past 5 to 6 years. So I mean, what has been the biggest challenge for you while dealing with them? And then ultimately they ultimately give you feedback, because they are your ultimate customers. So how do you accommodate those changes and their needs in your business model? So what was your biggest challenge in that aspect?
So I think this is something which is very generic and applies to almost all businesses, not just businesses who are building out for say MSMEs or any customer, right? One very common thing that exists is that you need to be very, very focused on what your customer wants, right? So I mean, there's this saying that Y Combinator has perpetuated, right? That build something customers love rather than like. So what is very critical is that whatever problem statement you are attacking, whatever industry you are targeting, whatever customer you are targeting, you should be very close to them and figure out iteratively what things you need to build out, right? I mean, for example, say in our case, because we were solving for MSMEs, almost 2-3 times a week we used to sit in their offices only and iterate on the product, right? We used to get a lot of feedback. So I mean, for example, there is this theory called lean startup, right, wherein you build out a minimum viable product, go out in the market, learn from the feedback, and keep that feedback cycle very very short, right? I think that applies to almost all businesses, which we also applied on ourselves. We built out a very small prototype of a product and gave it to few early customers. We got a lot of feedback from them that allowed us to improve. And one unique thing in our case is basically, I mean, and the harder thing for us was that MSMEs are, at least when we started, the tailwind around COVID did not exist. That a lot of digitization happened post COVID for a lot of MSMEs, right? But in 2019, when we were just starting out, the problem statement that existed was that still a lot of SMEs were, I mean, not very accepting to technical products, right? They were still laggards in that entire tech adoption curve. So if you are able to, at least, if we were very convinced that if we are able to convince them, right, then we can essentially grow the business very quickly. So that is what we figured out. Another common thing to figure out for any new entrepreneur who's starting out and especially building out a tech business, say solving some core problem, is that are you solving a, I mean, is your solution a vitamin or is your solution a painkiller, right? So for example, if your solution is something that is just a good to have for someone, right, it's a vitamin for them, it would not matter to them if your solution stopped working for them. The amount of value you can create out of that is going to be invariably lesser versus if you're creating a painkiller, right? If your app stopped working, right, would they have a real life challenge or existential challenge in their business? If that is there, then you can essentially create a huge amount of value out of that. So I think that is also one very key insight that any new entrepreneur, anyone building out or figuring out ideas should think about.
So as you said, I mean, there was something that feedback was your key role, right? While converting and interacting with MSMEs. So I read a book called No Rules Rules. So it talks about Netflix's work culture,
Correct.
and it talked about how feedback played an important role within for the improvement of the work environment. So how do you think? What is your opinion on how important is feedback for the functioning of the company and also the work environment overall?
I think it applies to almost every aspect of any business, right? Whether it be internal culture or whether it be external culture, right? If you're not listening to the end consumer, right? In some cases, for an employee culture, it would be the end consumer is your own employee, right? Whether he's happy or not. If you talk about externality, right? You're talking about the end consumer who's using your product, right? If that feedback is not good, the word of mouth will not be good, and then your marketing cost will increase over time, right? And it will become very hard for you to grow. And second thing is obviously that if you're not ahead of the curve building out things for them, then other competitors will essentially catch up with you and beat you to the market very very quickly, right? And today, I mean, once you get the early headwinds, once you start getting the early users, invariably 2-3 competitors will crop up once they realize that there is a market to be cracked here. So I think it is very critical to be listening to the consumers and have the shortest form of feedback. Shark Tank is more of a platform for maybe seed stage businesses or pre-seed stage businesses which are just about raising their first or second round. And first round, if they're raising the second round, the first round has to be much smaller. It cannot be